Hi guys, so my name is Bethany Gettis and I am the mother of two amazing little boys and I'm the owner of Nutritious and Delicious. And I actually started my journey working in the diet industry as a nurse. So I was working with a lot of people trying to help them lose weight for about 5 years. And this was all before I had my boys. So that was my journey where I started. And I ended up actually wanting to help people further with their nutrition and their weight loss. So what I noticed in the diet industry was that people were actually really struggling with their mindset around food. And actually being able to help them was something that made me really passionate, wanting to do my business. So Nutritious and Delicious came from that, and it was created around holistic nutrition and mindset today. In between all of that, I actually became a mom. So after I left the nursing industry, I became a mom to two amazing little boys. My first, I had very bad postpartum depression with, and I really used my skills as a nurse and looking at the mindset factors for myself. And that really helped me get through some of the toughest times. And then when my boys were 3 and 5, I actually became a widow as well. So I have a lot of personal experience working around, trauma with a lot of people as well. And I'm super excited to be on here today talking to Dawn and Gina. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this podcast today. Thank you guys.
Thank you. Hello, this is Gina and Dawn with Focused Healthy Family. This is podcast number 17. And today we're talking with Bethany Gettis from Nutritious and Delicious. But before we get into the interview, let's hear a word from our sponsor. Today's podcast is sponsored by Q Sciences. Don and I discovered that the supplements we were taking and giving to our children were not being absorbed properly. I was very excited when I found Q Sciences. I was impressed with the quality of the products and that they provide maximum absorption. They have a variety of products, including a Q Max product, which is a combination of 3 products, including vitamins, minerals, and a probiotic. They also have hemp oil, a vitamin B12 spray, a sleep spray, and kids products. I've really seen a difference in how these products are improving how I feel, improving my mental health, and I'm happy with the quality of these products and how they're helping our whole family. If you'd like to learn more,
simply go to qsciences.focusedhealthyfamily.com. That's the letter Q, sciences.focusedhealthyfamily.com. Or you can find a link on the front page of the focusedhealthyfamily.com website.
And stop throwing your money away on supplements that don't work and use a quality product like Q Sciences.
And we're back. So, Bethany, thank you for being part of this. I'm kind of excited to talk about this because it's about food.
Yeah, I love it.
And the struggles that we go through a lot of kids go through at dinner, which, I come from a family of, I had 5 other siblings. And so when food was put out on the table, you got it as quick as you could because you wanted to make sure you got a piece, for one.
Yeah.
And 2, that if there was any left over, you wanted to be the one to get that 1 leftover or 2 leftover pieces. So, but I don't think I got any kind of bad stuff off of that. I don't think. Now we're going to have to probe into that and see. So tell us a little bit more about about your business and what you have to deal with in this subject.
Definitely. Thanks, Dawn. Yeah, Nutritious and Delicious was something that created because I was really passionate about helping people and working in the diet industry as a nurse for about 5 years. What I noticed was the diet industry was a revolving door for people. And every year people came back in, the same people, heavier. And I was really wondering what the difference was, why it wasn't working for them, even though I knew at the time, them following a plan, a program was really helpful. They were coming back in even heavier. So I'm like, there's something here that's not working. So we usually found it was mindset traps, and a lot of it related back to growing up as a child around food And again, we don't know what we don't know until we kind of get to these points later in our life and we look back and think, oh, this is kind of what was happening as a kid. And I kind of took these tapes and now I'm putting it onto my children. So that's kind of where I come in now, and I help a lot of families out.
Well, I know, I've worked with, actually in my EFT practice, I've actually worked with some people that, I don't know, probably a half dozen people on weight loss.
Mm-hmm.
And, what I saw was the roller coaster ride, lose weight, year later, gain it back, like you were just talking about. And that, and the exact same thing I found was it's got to do with this first. You got to get this up here in the mind clear to be able to really make it stick, make it work.
Yeah. It's honestly, it comes from a place of people having tapes, a lot of self-worth tapes as well. There's different things people have grown up with. Like two people from the same family can have completely different tapes, and it's no fault of parents or anything like that. But sometimes we just overhear something and we take it with us. And this is where I think a lot of parents are struggling with their own kids at the dinner table and wondering why. And you got to remember, when you've got two different parents from two different sets of families, there's sometimes conflicts in the way, you want your kids to eat or not eat. And there's sometimes different preferences. Could be like nutritional imbalances, intolerances. Like there's a whole mixture of things that are going on. And people are realizing, I think, that not only are they having like their emotional tapes and everything around food, now it's becoming a power struggle at the dinner table with their own family.
Yeah. I grew up in the 70s and 80s being told to eat every bite on my plate because there were starving children in Africa. And that idea of having to finish everything. I'm also from Italian family background. And so lots and lots of food and overeating. And I remember when our kids were young, just still having that mindset of you've got to eat everything. And somehow my brother and sister and I were not really picky eaters. I'm not sure how. We pretty much ate everything. And so I remember my own kids like being really particular about things. And I'm like, I'd always look at Don, this must come from you. Because
okay, so there is something now.
And just having to, and wanting to do things a little differently, right? After several years realizing, wanting to change these, but they're so ingrained in us. We don't realize how strongly this affects us.
Okay, so we're getting into my psychology now, but I mean, now I'm thinking about it, and what happened a lot in my house was the arguments would begin between my mom and my dad.
Yeah. And
my dad would get frustrated and go, his favorite line was, "Dang it, the luck, I can't even eat without you complaining, and so it was always this, now I think about it, there was always this tension at the dinner table.
There's a lot of emotion around food.
Yeah.
And it can be positive, negative, neutral. And I think that's where we need to get it to, is a neutral place, because there's a lot of good memories around food. Think about birthday parties and ice cream and cake, and there's enjoyment, right? Like, and then there's not enjoyment, where you're sitting at the dinner table and you have to finish your dinner and like 2 hours have gone by and you hate this Brussels sprout that you're eating or whatever. And you're cursing this thing that you don't like. And you go into an adult and you're like, I don't eat that ever again, So that's, I think, where a lot of people get to sort of being an adult, and they're like, they'll kind of go to the extreme of, I don't like vegetables, I won't eat any vegetables, and they're kind of not being open to it anymore. Children are kind of a little bit easier to deal with because they're more adaptable. But if you're pushing things to them where they have to finish their plate and they're stretching their stomachs and it's physically like hurting them or causing like indigestion and things like that, it's going to start to become like a power struggle. And then now you're putting emotion into food, right?
Well, I actually had a client when I was in my practice, when I was working with, and I was working with her for weight loss. But one of the things that she wouldn't eat bananas, and what it came out as we were working with it. One time she remembers her mom. she was eating a banana and her mom walked by and she told her that if you keep eating those, you're going to be as big as a house someday.
Yeah. See, there's the tape.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that locked into her.
Yeah. And
And
that's what I mean. As a parent, like you may think that you've said something, unknowingly but it's that whole notion of like the lies we tell our children of like, don't sit too close to the TV, you get square eyes, or, eat your crust because you get curly hair. And I still remember actually one time when I was about 6, I think it was, I brought this up the other day, but this little boy in my class had really curly hair. And I remember walking up to him being like, you must have eaten your crust. And he just looked at me like I was crazy or something. But I was like, but that's what happens, right? So, you walk around with these like notions that food is a certain way, or food is good and food is bad. And that's another thing I think a lot of parents struggle with is kind of claiming food as that's junk food, that's not good for you, like we can't eat that, or adults doing it to themselves. And this is what creates binge cycles and starving cycles and all that and it also creates people going into diet industries when they tell themselves like, I can't eat that because I'm not supposed to. And what do we typically do as human beings? We always do what we can, so we always want what we can't have. So that's why I think a lot of people end up dieting, they're black and white about it, and then they go the opposite direction, right?
Yeah.
And is that what you kind of talk about as far as food being neutral, trying to get it out of the bad good scenario and just make it it's food basically or something?
I usually have to talk to the person first, because a lot of the times I have to kind of gauge what's going on with them first. Like if they're like coming up to me and asking about a meal plan, or like, I need to lose this amount, and I always find out, well, why? Like, what are you here for? Like, what is the reason? Is it a health issue? Okay, yes, if it's a health issue, like we kind of need to get this under control. Whether it's their blood sugars, maybe they're celiac, or they've got a dairy intolerance, and we need to focus on their health. Like it depends on what direction we're going to go in. Other people I have come to me, they've had eating disorders in the past. They've admitted to being bulimic, things like that. When I hear things like that, or I hear things that drive me to that direction of that's what's happened to them, I usually tend to stay away from like having them be too rigid with their foods and meal plans. That's where I think they need more coaching, because that's where we need to start with them being neutral with food and having more suggestions, me telling them like, okay, let's try this instead, versus following a plan. Because if they come off the plan, that's when they'll go into like those cycles, right? And the vast majority of people usually do have a few tapes here and there of food. It's trying to sort of undo that while they're having a meal plan involved, because most people can typically follow a meal plan and be okay with that. But then if they're getting kind of too scrutinized with like, well, can I have this tablespoon of that? And, I had this that wasn't very good for me, but like now I feel really guilty. Like if I start hearing those things, I'm like, you need to do some coaching, because you're being too scrutinized, like with like exactly what you're doing. Like if you're kind of like measuring everything, we need to keep people more like generalized, like, okay, well, you didn't have that protein today, let's like switch it out for this one instead. Or, if you're craving chocolate, instead of having the milk chocolate, let's try and do something with the dark chocolate, like melting it and putting it with strawberries or something like that, right? So, people, I can tell when there's that black and white thinking going on usually.
Well, yeah. And the worst thing is to stress over your mistake, or stress over the fact that you fell off the wagon of that, because that stress is really affecting you probably even more than the bad food.
It does. Cortisol levels, like being your stress hormone, when people go into stress, you can't bring their blood sugars down, even if, they're eating really well. So even from a health perspective, and they're trying to, lose weight and they're stressed out, it depends what's going on in their life as well. But if they're stressing out based on the foods that they're eating, I would switch them more to just a coaching aspect than just following meal plans and stuff. Because again, you kind of have to gauge it based on the person that you're dealing with. And that's why, again, the diet industry, it's a one size fits all. And you are conforming to that diet. You are conforming to exactly what it's saying. And if you're not following it, you're off, you're bad, you're not doing the right thing. And that's where people start with the beat up and the tapes come back, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I see that in my own life. I've been doing kind of a whole foods. I did a food program recently. And I was rushing out the door the other day and I grabbed a bag of, there were grain-free pretzels, but I ate like half the bag because I didn't have lunch. And I realized how terrible I felt.
Yeah.
And probably because I've been eating pretty clean whole foods. And it's like, okay, I did that. I saw how I felt. I was exhausted a couple hours later. And so, rather than beat myself up about it, I need to just move on.
Yeah. And it's more like the next time you kind of say to yourself, okay, maybe what could have I done differently? I probably should have pre-planned something ahead of time, because that's what I think most people run into the problem with, is like, that's the first tape, is like, I don't have time. And that's the one that I deal with a lot of women, especially moms, because they put everybody else first and they're kind of last on the to-do list. So you try and get them to like make themselves some lunch or anything during the day. They're living off coffee and hope, I guess, to get to the end of the day. And then think about it. They're tired at the end of the day. And now they're trying to get their family to eat, a decent meal. And, I usually suggest, even with parents, like, dinner time is the hardest time to get vegetables into children. You're better off getting them in during the breakfast and lunchtime, because they're more hungry. They're more able to actually get that in. Dinner time, most kids and most parents are tired. So that's usually, I would say, the dinner where you want to kind of have it's a bit more relaxed, but I find people do the opposite. And then it becomes this battle at dinner time, right?
Right. Yeah, we see that a lot. We use that as an example in our communication skills class, as far as that battle at dinner time. It's, not liking whatever you've served them and not wanting to eat it. And the best way, to handle that, especially this whole idea of the foods being neutral. I'm quite curious more about some tips and ideas for doing that.
Yeah, definitely. Once, when I started using with my boys, like when I started kind of bringing vegetables into their life, I would start cutting it up and then just offer it to them as I was cutting it up. And I wouldn't sort of give them any notion that I liked it or not, because that's the other thing. They're kind of looking to you for cues. Like, do you like it first? Because I don't want to try it if you don't like it. So I usually just gave it to them. And sometimes they liked it, sometimes they didn't. Another good one is at the table, like having some fruits and vegetables or something that typically they haven't had before, maybe on a plate in the middle. They're more likely to want to put it on their own plate and have that control for themselves. That's where I think a lot of dinners, things like tacos or making your own pizza at home, kids get to decide, and it's giving them the control back. Or which vegetable would you like tonight? Would you like to have the broccoli or the carrots? And giving them that choice versus like, okay, broccoli, now you have to eat the entire thing. And then, so everyone's different, right? Like my kids have preferences to vegetables too. And if I make a salad, sometimes one of them's like, I don't like tomatoes. All right, tomatoes aren't going on your plate, but you're eating whatever is in the salad, right? And the other one loves tomatoes. So we don't cater to like each person specifically, but we try to sort of, let's get one of you to pick a vegetable out and the other one, just try it, right? Like just try one at least. If you don't like it, you don't have to eat it. Like we don't like the whole like forcing them on it, because again, that creates what you talked about with a banana, like tapes around it. And it's just that notion, that feeling around the banana itself, like in there. And another good way to, if your kids are really struggling not to get any fruits and vegetables in, is smoothies is a good way to get it in. Mask it with something that they like, whether it's peanut butter, banana, if they do like banana, or strawberries. You could do like a chocolate vegan protein powder, add that in there. And then also things like pasta sauces. That's what I just used recently. We had like the frozen vegetables and I had about 3 complaints. So I was like, okay, I'm blending this up and it's going into a pasta sauce, and everyone ate it. No problem. So you just have to kind of mix it up a little bit.
Yeah, we used the smoothie thing with our middle child, who wasn't a fan of fruits, almost more so than vegetables.
Oh,
but she loves chocolate. That's how I get things in her.
There you go.
And I would make a smoothie with, it was like almond milk, bananas, chocolate, and then I'd put spinach in there.
Yeah.
Blend it up real good. And the chocolate, the brown covered up the spinach.
Well, she has texture issues. Like she won't eat strawberries, not because of the flavor, but because of the seeds.
Yeah.
She can't take that and we run into that a lot. The sensory issues play into a lot of food issues,
Yeah.
the way the palate feels, or the smell of it, or and then, so like I said, she won't eat some of that stuff because of the feel of it.
What's interesting is children, depending on ages and stuff as well, and what's going on with them, is that texture is a big thing, and that's why like children should be playing with their food at first, because it helps them kind of get associated with it. So sometimes even if they're not eating it, you could try something like an art or something that they're playing with it on their, and actually kind of touching it. So it's a different way of sensing it versus eating it, right? Like it's a way of kids understanding their foods. So, usually that's what toddlers in that age group would typically do, is they're mashing their like food between their fingers, and you're like, stop that. But it's actually a way for them to kind of understand their food and how, how it goes into the body and what it smells like, what it tastes like. So that's another way to kind of get them used to the food without actually having to eat it yet, is you could get them either to cut it or to play with it and just to put it in a craft, or make like I don't know if you've ever seen like those fruit like pictures that people do, and they'll kind of make art out of fruit and things like that. Like that's another kind of unique crafty way to kind of get them to sort of associate with the food before they eat it as well. Make it into a craft.
Yeah,
Well,
I love
to.
Go ahead.
Well, I used to, when I was a stay-at-home dad for the first couple of years of my oldest child, and we had this book called How are you
peeling?
How are you peeling? That's it. And it's just what you talked about, but it's picture book with different vegetables. I think even some fruits that they had carved faces into. So what we would do is we take the book with us going grocery shopping, and I would have my son pick. I said, "Can you find this one?" And then we would see if we could find one that had some kind of face already on it, or some kind of weird shape to it. We played around with the book and going through the produce. We'd spend probably half hour just in the produce section, just kind of looking for stuff and naming it and talking about what it tastes like and all of that.
But he'll remember that. That's the thing. Like he'll remember that like that good association to it, because of it. So that's like a really good memory that you're creating. So again, like you said, with the strawberries, whether, she's not wanting to eat them, she can still create good memories in a sense of crafting something with it, right? Or playing with it or doing something with it, right? Because that way it kind of still puts that good connotation to it. So she's more open to it later down the road. Another aspect of children and adults too, where they kind of gear away from certain foods, is because they may actually be intolerant to them. So sometimes we're intolerant to things that it might not be the strawberry itself, but it may be the pesticide that's on the strawberry. And it doesn't always come out as like a typical allergic reaction right away. Some people, have hives on their stomach. Some people get acne from certain foods. That's typically dairy related. Some people have like upset gut, like different reactions. Some people get eczema, dry skin. So there's a whole host of different things that people may be experiencing, and listening to children as well. Because sometimes if a child's saying like, my tummy hurts or something after a meal, and it's happening kind of often, or you're noticing they constantly have a runny nose, or they've got like dry skin, it's typically something to do with their food. And if they're avoiding certain things, it might not be that they know it themselves, but they're avoiding it because their body is rejecting it. So that's where I think like intolerance testing is probably a key factor as well, just to rule that out.
Yeah, we've done some of that testing with our older two kids. Kind of interesting to look at that and see that. I've also seen the other side, and I'm curious your take on this, where when our middle child was going through her OCD, we were trying to figure out ways to help her. And I had one coach like let her choose her food. Well, she was craving dairy and sweets and wheat. And we later learned she definitely had the wheat intolerance. But how sometimes our bodies crave what we're not supposed to have.
Yeah, that's very true. You'll notice that, like, for instance, like I'm dairy intolerant myself, and I grew up on dairy, but the difference was when I was a child, we had a milkman come to the door in England where I used to live, and that doesn't happen anymore. You like getting it in a glass bottle from the actual farmer, from a cow that, you know, wasn't hooked up to a machine all day. And now our food industry has changed so much. And even if I haven't been aware of eating dairy, I will really crave that food right away after. And it does send out like histamines and reactions in people's bodies and things like that. So typically, if you're overeating a certain type of food, or you can't leave it alone and you're always wanting it, there's usually a reason behind it. Wheat and dairy and soy are typically the first ones that most people are intolerant to. And it's because it's changed so much in our industry in the last, you know, couple of decades here, just because we're manufacturing so much food that our wheat is genetically modified now. Our cows are hooked up to machines most of the day, and they're filled with hormones to get them to lactate. And a lot of people are having issues because of the way it's being done. Right. So it's not so much like, you know, the cow milk itself, it's kind of what's going into the cow. And people don't realize, like, when you're buying a jug of milk or anything, it's not going to say like antibiotics and hormones on it, but that's what's in our milk. And then, you know, we're wondering why we have all these, like, you know, teenagers growing like crazy and on all this stuff, because there's growth hormone in our food, right? And you know, we've been trying to replant seeds from even vegetables lately, and they're not growing, and it's because the foods are genetically modified, so the seeds won't recreate again. So that's interesting to see as well. Is, you know, our vegetables as well are kind of going that direction too.
Well, that kind of brings up a thought for me, is that because one of your tapes is I don't have funds, the money part, and I'm kind of, you know, curious is, you know, what do you tell somebody that, like, I know organic and naturals and whole foods tend to cost more.
Oh yeah.
And so what I know, I work at a naturopathic doctor, and in fact, I'm at his office right now.
Right.
And he one thing he told us was, you know, try to, as far as organic, go for the things that are the worst. You know, if you can't afford to get all of it organic, you know, get the hard shelled items. You know, don't, you know, worry about those as much. As he calls strawberries toxic bombs, because they absorb so much toxins and so much, you know, the pesticides and stuff like that. So I was curious your thoughts about when somebody comes to you and says, well, we really don't have a lot of money. What can we do still to protect ourselves?
That's tough for a lot of people. And that's obviously come up in the last few years with everything, you know, hiking through the roof, groceries and everything going right. So it's kind of pick your poison, basically, because like you said, you know, with the strawberries and things like that, you want to go with what's called the dirty dozen. So the dirty dozen are things like spinach, strawberries, things that are more like open to being able to absorb these pesticides. The ones I would more look at, like, if anything, I'm going to get people to switch over to is, instead of drinking things like dairy milk that would have hormones and antibiotics in it, I would get them to switch over to things like either oat milk, almond milk, a hemp milk, and actually look at sort of the pricing is very similar for those. And you can get a lot of things on sale as well. Also, where you shop is a big one, because I'm an advocate of shopping at like more of a discount place, but you can still find the same products in those organic aisles. And I'd rather shop there and buy the exact same thing than go to like a high-end store and I'm paying another $2 or $3 extra for each item. So you think about adding up those items at the end of the till, you're going to be paying a lot more, right? So I think, first of all, choosing the right grocery store for yourself. Another one is to buy in bulk, especially your protein, whether you're buying tins of beans, lentils, or anything like that. That would be a fairly cheap way of getting protein in if you are like a vegan vegetarian. Meat, again, if you're trying to stay away from like meat that's like the antibiotics and all that kind of stuff that are fed to the cows and things like that. What we personally do is we actually go to like a butcher, a farmer, and we buy like a quarter cow that is grass fed. And yes, up front, the cost is a little bit more expensive, but when you actually break it down, we're paying a lot less than you would be at the grocery store, but we're holding on to a lot more meat and putting in a deep freezer and making sure we actually have all these chunks of meat for pretty much like it lasts us a good 6 months. So whether, 6 months you're going to the grocery store and you keep buying kind of meat over and over again, I can tell you that meat is going to get more expensive, just with everything going on, the transport for, bringing the meat in and all that kind of stuff, the gas prices, like it all contributes. So you're going to start to see a shift of people eating more vegan, vegetarian because it's cheaper. And I think that's where a lot of people aren't really understanding of where the protein is for vegan, vegetarian, because you have to pair them, pair proteins together, like rice and beans makes a complete protein. Eating them on its own, eating rice on its own or beans on its own isn't enough. Your body needs those complete proteins, and a lot of people struggle with that when they are vegan, vegetarian, and eating whole foods. But you can find alternatives. The eggs as well, another one. That's a cheaper form of protein. Same with things like tin tuna, but also you got to look at like, okay, tin tuna you don't want to be eating every day because of mercury, all that stuff too. And then eggs as well. Eggs is one you could probably get away with pretty much every day. We usually, for that one as well, do buy them from a farm because they're cheaper as well. And again, buying in bulk, because even buying eggs now and you buy organic eggs, it's a good probably Canadian $7 for about 12. So we usually buy flats, like 30 eggs or so, like from a farmer. Fruits and vegetables depends on the season. So I usually say buy within the season if you can, depending on where you live. We live somewhere that we don't get a lot of fruits and vegetables because we live in a very winterized place. So I would usually suggest to people that are in like Canada, like the northern states, would be to buy frozen fruits and vegetables. It'd be a lot cheaper, and you can make a lot of smoothies, and their nutrients are really good still because they're usually flash frozen, but a lot cheaper. So like berries, for example. Lately I went to the store and it was probably, I don't know, like it's been quite high, like $8 for a little tiny thing. So just go and buy like the frozen ones instead. So there's always ways around kind of the budget stuff as well. It just depends on like what your diet is already like right now.
Yeah, those are great pointers and tips, because we're known to shop at multiple grocery stores, getting the items we want at the best prices. And there's some great companies now out there that'll deliver produce. And, I've got friends part of CSA's, Community Supported Agriculture. And
good.
I have lots of friends who have chickens. So
That's great.
getting a great source of eggs. Yeah, because in the US, it's probably pretty close to $5 US dollars for a dozen eggs.
A dozen eggs. Yeah, good egg, like organic or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, and we've been doing that. I don't know that there's gone to Canada yet, but it's a thing called Misfit Market, and it's a company that takes it's all organic, I believe, and natural, and they find the things that the supermarkets kind of reject, that may not look as good, or getting closer to its time.
Sometimes it's just overstock of an item, and so you kind of can order online each week and pick out the items that they have. So yeah, to me, it's helped us get an increased variety of vegetables. I'm looking at the best prices on the items that week, and it's helped us expand our palate a little bit with different kinds of vegetables. Like, oh, purple sweet potatoes, let's try that.
Changing the
the kids, some of the stuff that they look at and go, what, and they'll still sometimes eat it, if we like I say, you put it in front of them, kind of thing.
I love that idea. I wish I had known that when they were younger, as far as letting them, pick things on their plate.
Well, you used to, I love telling this story, because what you used to do to get her to eat, like if she,
when she was a toddler, she's rolling her eyes virtually or whatever, because she's 20 now. We played a game with her, and I'd do a fake phone call and say the monkeys are we got like 10 pieces of whatever, or 10 green
Yeah.
beans, and they're going to come eat your food. And I'd be having this fake conversation. And when I looked away, she'd start eating.
That's cute. Oh, bless.
And I don't know, as far as, mindset and what kind of tape and message.
Yeah, I was gonna say, now I think about it, it's like, oh, yeah.
The monkey's gonna come eat my food. Yeah.
We were having fun with it, making a game with it. I'm curious your take on those kind of ideas.
No, I think I think a lot of parents do things like that. Like that's a positive reinforcement. Like, you're trying to get them. I think it's more when people are trying to sort of get their kids to sit and eat things and they're making it more of a punishment to do it. And if you're being creative, like definitely like, there's times where sometimes I just say to parents, like, look, just put some ketchup on their plate, let them just dip it in ketchup. And like, you're getting them to get it in, like, you kind of have to pick your battle.
Yeah.
And sometimes it requires like adding different sauces or getting them to try and make it themselves, and again, a lot of parents just want to jump in and like fix it or do it for them. And like, you're actually not helping them that way. So, that's where I think letting the children sometimes take the lead a little bit with obviously, like cutting up their own fruits and vegetables, but obviously using a blunt knife if they're little, and obviously keeping safety a priority. But definitely like, yeah, there's lots of little things that parents do to try to like get their kids to be creative with the foods. But yeah, it's more of the punishment around food, or you're not allowed to have that, or keeping certain food out of the house and making it very like off limits. Like that's when kids are more likely to kind of go behind their back and do something and sneak food. So
yeah, I got to tell a funny story. So my mother, she raised us in a very healthy, we always had 2 vegetables at dinner. One was green, right? So she didn't buy things like cookies and stuff. We had pretzels for snacks and, not very much sweets, except holidays maybe we had. But I guess we were teenagers at the time, and my dad liked Hydrox cookies, which are like Oreos. And she would buy them, I guess, for him, put them in the drawer in the dining room buffet chest, and we would all discover them and eat them.
The hidden stash is
behind, and then she would go buy another one.
Yeah.
Put it in the same spot. And I don't know if you remember when you met me, but I used to, I moved out on my own, and I'd like eat ice cream for dinner, and I bought candy and I would hide it in my own apartment.
Every drawer had something, it was just
and just that hiding it from myself, like I wasn't going to remember where I put it.
Because that's the notion, is that's supposed to be hidden away.
Yeah.
Right. And it's that notion around that the sugar.
Well, right. And then, when I was a kid, we didn't have a lot of sweets either, but my best friend at the time, his mom had bowls of hard candy bars all over the house. It was cool. It was like walking into, oh my God,
Willy Wonka.
And he didn't like it was like no big thing to him. He didn't eat that much of it. But I was like, oh, I was always like,
stuff in your pocket.
But
wanting what you're not supposed to have, right? Yeah.
And again, because it was already around him, it was neutralized, where it was always available.
Yeah.
So he didn't have that need to like go for it, right? Whereas you're like packing your bags.
Okay, so there's a lot of things that I'm now realizing about food with me. Okay, thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. But the other thing I was thinking about as you said this is what the dinner table represents to families is what I think. Because when I think about our family, it's a time when we get together and we talk. We've played games around, around the dinner table, and it was an enjoyable time for our family to get together. Even now, they were together last night. We had them all over, and they talk and they kid each other, and it's a very friendly, happy kind of play. Gina, do you agree? I don't think I'm exaggerating.
Our oldest lives on his own, so we try about once a week for him to come over with his girlfriend, and it's usually taco night, which is interesting. You talk about, they make their own. I put all the ingredients out. They get to decide what goes on them. But and having that family time together.
I think that's important as far as making it a friendly, fun place in a
Right.
way. You know, not having a dinner table where nobody speaks, and I've been in households like that where you're not allowed to speak during your eating time, and
Hmm.
there were certain ways you had to do it, and a lot of control and a lot of stuff going on. And to me, it would make for a better eating habit too, and a better, even being more relaxed, being able to take the food getting digested better and all of that.
Hmm.
I don't.
Definitely. There's a lot of different, if you think about how many different families there's people that watch TV while they're eating dinner at the dinner table. And there's people that I can imagine now that sit on their phones and not look at each other. And, you know, it's things have changed a lot. And I think, we're very much big on like no TV upstairs. Like we only have one TV, it's in our basement, and it's basically for family nights, movie nights, things like that. And again, that's another place we gather around. And it's more of like just having a pajama party with the kids. And like, again, we have celebrations in terms of food down there as well. But we also have the dinner time is about, yeah, sitting down and enjoying each other, asking about each other's day. Kind of, we always talk about what we're grateful for. We go around, and that's kind of like our way of sort of like, how was your day? Like, what are you grateful for? And yeah, a relaxing space. And there's obviously a lot of families too that don't get together around dinner. Everybody kind of eats on the run, or standing up in a car or whatever. And you kind of take that with you into your next life, and you can either take it with you to your next family, meaning like, I really want to have dinner time at me. It's something that I never had, or I actually want to keep, our tradition of like a family dinner. And I think a lot of families are good at like the family meals in terms of like holidays and events. And we're much the hosts for things like that ourselves, like birthdays, events, all that kind of stuff. But we also on a daily basis, as much as we can, is get together at the dinner table and yeah, everybody eat together, right? Versus kind of everyone eating separately. So I think a lot of that has changed with like technology. And you think about how many kids are on screens now, trying to get kids away from like video games or being on their cell phones. And yeah, I could imagine.
Yeah, with our older kids that are 24 and 20, we ate at the dinner table almost every night,
Yeah.
and now that they're older and we have 13-year-old, we sitting all together at the dinner table is less frequent than it used to be.
Yeah.
She's often wanting to bring her food upstairs because her friends are all online. Yeah, so but we still have those times when we do come together, and we have done things like breakfast. Days when I don't go into work, I work part-time. We have breakfast together.
That's great. Like, even if you can get one meal or even a snack, like for me, I'm very much about like my boys don't always get to sit and eat with me per se, because sometimes they'll be hungry and they'll eat a little bit earlier. But we'll typically do a few nights a week where we sit down, the four of us as a family, and have meals together for dinner. And then sometimes they usually have their little breakfast together. And sometimes I'll sit down and do like a lunch with them. So it just depends on what's going on during the day. But I'm very much a big component of eating at the table and not eating on the run, because I find it's pushing people into this area of like, we don't have time, and like we got to like always be somewhere or be doing something, and we're in this like hamster wheel race of like a life. Whereas,
Mhm.
let's go back to the good old days where we can actually sit down and like enjoy ourselves and eat food.
Oh my, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Bethany, just as a kind of a final thought here is maybe telling our audience how they best can find out about you. I know you have a podcast, and so if you can give some of that information out, and we'll have it up on the website too. But I wanted you to be able to speak it out now as far as how they can best find out more about you.
Yeah, definitely. So all of my social media stuff, my podcast is all linked on my website. So that's usually just a place I like to let people go to. So that's www.ndelish.com. And yeah, there's a few recipes on there that you can print off for yourself if you want to try some things out. And I do have a few videos on there. We talked about earlier is about the 5 tapes, and that's pretty typical for a lot of families. I don't have time, I don't have the energy, I don't have the funds. And that's something really good to actually listen to as well, which is on the website too.
Well, thank you so much, Bethany. We've enjoyed talking with you and getting all the ideas and information from you. And I know parents appreciate this because, like you said, dinner time can be a real struggle. And my big takeaway from there is, having vegetables early in the day. That's something my husband and I have tried to do recently. And I'm sure if we could have incorporated when the kids were little, they would look at it as so strange. You're But thank you so much for being here. That's our podcast for today. We hope you have enjoyed it. We'd love to hear from you. Make sure to leave us a comment. And if you like what you heard today, you can find more about our parent coaching program or join us at our upcoming workshop. You can find out at focusedhealthyfamily.com. Follow us on Facebook at Focused Healthy Family. I have an Instagram account, Gina at Focused Healthy Family, and you can see the notes, Bethany Gettis's information, her website, there as well. So thank you. And thank you for being with us, Bethany.
Thanks so much for having me.
And remember, the way you handle your children today will affect their future.